Well, Thanksgiving over here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, June 8th, Lebanon Redevelopment Commission meeting. Today we will begin with a call to order and a pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, guys. We're going to do a quick roll call of the members.
I really don't do that. We just
Please
say
note that all members are present.
Yes.
You will notice we actually have a slightly new crowd this evening. Keith Campbell is joining us from the Lebanon City Council as a new appointment. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming back. I think you were on in the past at some point, I'm sure. And with that, I will entertain, this is our first meeting since March 9th. So I believe all members got a copy of the March 9th minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion we approve March 9th minutes.
Second that motion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we're going to have an election of officers. As many of you know, Caleb Edwards did have to step down and moved out of town. So with that, that left a president position open on the board. So we will be electing new officers beginning for this meeting. Any motions for officers?
I'll make a motion that Corey Kuntz be president for the remainder of the year.
I drew the short straw. Second.
And I'll second it.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, I will entertain that motion. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. I appreciate it. And then we also have then vice president, correct? So any motions for vice president?
I nominate Dr. John Millman for vice president.
They're picking on the new guys.
I'll second that.
With the second down here on this end. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Congratulations.
Thanks.
And then do we
Thank you.
also have to appoint a secretary as well?
Yes.
All right, last one, secretary. Not everyone at once.
I'll nominate Dr. Taylor.
I will second Dr. Taylor. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Awesome. So we have our officers elected. Thank you guys very much. We've got some of that agenda item behind us. Next up, we have old business. I don't believe we have any old business on the table. Members? All right, on to new business. So we have our friends from Baker Tilly. They are our municipal advisors. They're going to give us an annual TIF report update. So Joe, you want to kick us off on that?
Absolutely, and just so the commission knows and our folks at home, Baker Tilly is still operating remotely. And so we have Lauren Tiemann from Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors with us this evening. We're going to attempt, as we've done through our WebEx platforms, appreciate the smile there, Lauren. We're going to take the laptop here. You'll be able to hear Lauren over the loudspeaker here. Once we have questions, I may need to relay those to her. She's going to share her screen, and the PowerPoint that our commission received earlier are ones that our viewers at home on our public access will be able to see. But she has that TIF, that tax increment financing financial report for us this evening. Lauren, we send it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us and me. I'm going to share my PowerPoint slides so you guys can see them. Can you see that PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yes,
Can
we do.
everyone hear me? Okay, awesome. So let me back up. So I'm here tonight. My name is Lauren Tiemann. I'm a senior consultant with Baker Tilly. We serve as financial advisors to the City of Lebanon and the Redevelopment Commission, and we're here to present the annual TIF report. And this is just to provide the Commission with an update on your TIF areas, as well as meet the annual meeting requirement that's required by the state for you to invite your overlapping taxing units and have a meeting with them. And I am trying to, is there a way that I can not make this full screen? Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
That's fine.
Yes. Never mind. Okay, so this first slide shows you your Baker Tilly team. It consists of Brian Colton, who's the principal, who may log on to the meeting. He had another meeting today, this evening, and then Emma Adlam, who is out of the office, and then myself, and our contact information is on the screen for you. The first few slides of our presentation include just some general information about TIF for anyone in the audience who may not be familiar with TIF. When an area is created, there's already assessed value in the ground. So that area, that AV is known as base AV, and that continues to go to the overlapping taxing units. Once the area is established and TIF starts to generate, then that increased AV is captured as incremental AV, and that is becomes tax increment to the Redevelopment Commission. Then once the area is ended by the Redevelopment Commission or it expires, both the incremental AV and the base AV becomes AV available to the overlapping taxing units. This next slide we included just to give you a brief depiction of how TIF areas work in connection with the redevelopment district. It has some terms that we'll use throughout the presentation. One I wanted to point out was the levy for special benefits tax. As you may know, some of the industrial park TIF bonds have a special benefits tax backup. While that's never been used, it is used as a formal pledge when the bonds were marketed. So we wanted to just reference that and how that works. And it's basically a levy on the redevelopment district, which is the same as the city of Lebanon. This final, here we go. TIF slide we have, TIF 101 slide, is just the expiration of the TIF areas. You can see the, the expiration date depends on when the area was established. So there are a couple different expiration date requirements depending on when the area was established. And we just wanted to include this for your reference for the future. So next I'll move into the different TIF areas you have. The first one and the largest TIF area you have is the industrial park area. It was created in 1994 and it's been expanded a variety of times. So each of those expansions have different expiration dates. You can see we've listed out your estimated TIF for the next 4 years, and we also included last year's TIF collections. So you can see we are estimating you to collect about 2.4 million of TIF, and you did collect about 2.4 million. For 2020 and 2021, you can see we're assuming a 15% reduction in your TIF due to the impacts of COVID-19 and the potential recession that may occur. So you can see we are dropping your TIF revenues just a little bit to 2.1 million in 2020. And for 2022 and beyond, we've taken away that assumption. Just to be conservative and just in case taxpayers are making their payments late or not at all, we wanted to include a reduction for that. This next slide shows the 7 bonds you have outstanding and payable from industrial park TIF. All of these bonds are payable from industrial park TIF, but there's also a pledge of property taxes, similar to that special benefits tax I referenced earlier. However, historically, the Commission has never needed that property tax levy. They've always been able to pay the debt service with TIF revenues. And we're estimating that to continue in the future. The last industrial park slide we have is the estimated cash flow. You can see we've shown 4 years of cash flow payments, or 4 years of cash flow estimates for you. We show those TIF estimates I showed you on the previous slide, along with your Vincent's lease rental payments of $240,000 and some miscellaneous receipts you've receipted in so far of interest payments, I believe. So your total revenues for 2020 are estimated to be about $2.4 million. The 3 disbursements categories we've included here include the debt service payments for the 7 bonds that were on the previous slide of about $2.4 million, along with annual pay-as-you-go expenses of about $740,000. And this includes things such as the State Road 39 bridge inspection, your Vincent's workforce coordinator, and your facade program. And then also we received some one-time pay-as-you-go expenses from Tanya to add into this cash flow as well. So you can see your total expenses for this year are estimated to be around $4 million. When you take that compared to your revenues and your cash on hand, or your cash balance at the beginning of the year, your estimated cash balance is about 2.6 at the end of 2020. Through the years, we estimated your revenues and expenditures to show an estimated cash balance at the end of 2023 to be 3.1 million. So this is just a summary. We have a more detailed cash flow of this with the line items for the different projects, as well as monthly cash flows for 2020 and 2021 in the TIF report that we distributed last week on pages 18 to 20. So if you want to look at additional detail, you can reference those pages. And then we also sent that in draft. So if you guys have any new projects that you discussed that you want us to include, we can model those into the cash flow as well. And if you have any questions as I go, feel free to stop me. So. The next TIF area is the DA Lubricant area. This is one of your areas that only a portion of the TIF you collect is pledged towards the bonds. 80% is used to pay the bonds and 20% to commission captures. So in 2020, we're estimating about $130,000 to be used to pay debt service, and the remaining $32,000 to be used by the commission. You can see on this slide, we broke out your cash flow into two different cash flows, one for the pledged TIF portion to pay the debt service, and the second for the commission TIF to show how much is available to the commission. You can note that we have a note at the bottom that these bonds mature on August 1st, 2022. So after that debt service payment, the full $160,000 of TIF will be available to the commission for projects. So you can keep this in mind as an additional revenue source for future pay-as-you-go projects, or if you decide to pass through AV in the future. And one thing I wanted to note on this slide as well, you'll see we have a shortfall estimated for 2020 and 2021. That is not the responsibility of the city. There's no special benefits tax backup on these bonds. They were purchased by the company, and so the company bears the risk of not having full debt service paid. The Building 11 area is the next area. Again, this one is split. The TIF coming in, 75% is pledged to the bonds and 25% is captured by the commission. You'll see a pretty big jump between 2019 and 2020, and that is due to Scott Barrett only paying their spring taxes on time. Their fall taxes were paid late, and we're estimating that to be included in the 2020 distribution, which is why there's a higher TIF estimate there. For the cash flows, we again split it out between the pledged TIF portion for debt service payments and the commission TIF. You can see that we're estimating a shortfall each year, but similarly to the DA Lubricant area, the city is not on the hook for these shortfall payments. And then there is some additional revenue, about $30,000 to $40,000 available for the next several years to the commission for other projects. The FiberNet area generates about $40,000 of TIF revenue each year, and this is similar to the previous two areas. The shortfall that you see in our cash flow for debt service payments is not the responsibility of the city. This area does pledge 100% of the TIF received to the bonds, so there is no commission TIF in this area. Next, we have the State Road 32 area. This one, again, pledges 75% to the bond payments. This one has a rather large jump between 2019 and 2020 in our estimated TIF revenues. You can see about $90,000 increase, and that is due to two abatements in the area rolling off. So as those roll off, you'll capture more TIF. We're estimating about $216,000 to be available to pay debt service this year. On our cash flow slides, you can see that we've, again, split it out. This one is a little unique in that there's not a shortfall estimated, and so only $107,000 is needed to pay debt service, so the commission will retain $109,000 of the pledged TIF portion. So that, coupled with the commission's TIF portion of 25%, adds up to about $180,000 of TIF revenue available in this area for commission projects this year. The next area is the downtown TIF area. This one, we're not estimating any TIF to be captured this year. However, as abatements start to roll off, we're expecting TIF to start coming on in 2021. As you can see, about $6,000. For the Kin Foods project area, it was created in 2017, and this one's unique from the previous areas that we've went through does not have an expiration date yet, since there's no bonds outstanding and payable from this area's TIF revenues. In 2019, we were estimating collections to be about $36,000. However, Kin Foods made their full 2019 tax payment late, so no TIF was collected in this area. But that will be included in your 2020 distribution, so that will be about double what we were estimating. The Gateway Marketplace area is one of your newer areas. It was created in 2018 when the 2018 bonds were issued to fund the mixed-use development. These bonds are payable from 3 sources of revenue: TIF, food and beverage, and a special benefits tax. As you can see in the catch at the bottom, TIF will slowly build over the next 4 years, and you can see in 2023 we're estimating it to be up to $260,000 as the development is completed. However, since you have debt service payments, those first 3 years, you can see that food and beverage will be needed to pay the debt service. But once you get to 2023, TIF will cover the full debt service payment, and you'll have a small amount remaining as well. So the final area is the Patterson Street area, created in 2018 as well, and this one was created to assist the developer with the construction of a speculative industrial building, and it was anticipated the developer would buy bonds, but we know that project's on hold, so that's all the information we included about that. We included a TIF estimate of about $55,000, but this assumed that the development was completed in 2019 and first assessed at the beginning of this year, so the actual first-year collections will depend on when the project is completed. The final requirement as part of the reporting requirements of the state to have this meeting was to discuss the impact of TIF and the impact of TIF on overlapping taxing units. So we wanted just to wrap up by talking about some of the impacts of TIF on the overlapping units. So one thing to keep in mind is that TIF areas can't be created unless the development wouldn't occur unless there was the TIF incentive. So it must pass the but-for test. TIF also postpones adding new assessed value to the tax base, which postpones the reduction in tax rates. As well, during TIF capture, the portion of TIF AV can be passed through to overlapping units if necessary, and when there is new development, new jobs and wages may occur in the city as well, which could generate additional local income taxes for the city. And finally, as I mentioned at the very beginning, when TIF areas end, the increase in assessed value is passed through to the tax base of the overlapping taxing units. So one thing you also hear is if TIF takes away from schools, so we just wanted to kind of cover how TIF can impact schools. So when schools are funded, they're funded largely by the state, and that's based on student enrollment. Operation funds and debt service funds of schools are levy limited, which means there's no revenue impact from the TIF capture. Also, TIF AV is added to the referendum AV, and so Lebanon Schools has a referendum AV, and that is about $2 million, but the Lebanon Schools AV is only $1.6 million. So they get an additional $400,000, or no, $400 million, those are billion, from the TIF in the area. So you can see about 9% of the Lebanon referendum AV comes from Lebanon TIF. So we just wanted to show you how the breakdown of the referendum AV for the schools and how TIF plays a big role in that. In the final slide, we wanted to discuss the impact of your industrial park TIF area, since it is your biggest TIF area. This area has funded $22 million of infrastructure from bonds that are payable from industrial park TIF. If those were issued as property tax bonds, you would have had to have an annual tax rate increase, and that would have increased your circuit breaker credits and caused additional revenue loss. One thing to keep in mind is that not all the buildings in the industrial park are captured in the TIF allocation area as well. And only certain parcels have their personal property captured. Other real property parcels, the personal property is included in the tax base of overlapping units. So I wanted to keep that relatively high level for you all because you have the report that you can go through and see more of the detail. But if you have any questions at this time, I can answer those.
Commission, questions? I had just two, just for clarifying. So the Patterson Street, is that Prairie Industries, what we know as Prairie Industries? Okay, perfect. And then Lauren, if you're able to go back to slide number 8, is that possible? My apologies.
It's a little hard, it's a little choppy to understand.
What the question was asked was, do you mind sharing your screen again and going to the 8th slide? Sorry, we're playing a little bit,
Yes.
little game of telephone here. What was on that 8th slide?
So if you look at the 8th slide, the expenditures, the one-time expenditures that was provided, 866,000 versus the budgeted one-time expenditures right above that.
We're not sure if you heard that. It was the
I heard bits and pieces, I believe.
expenditures question, the 866, right, Corey?
Right, so as you
One-time
look at the,
expenses?
correct.
Are you
leave
wondering
it-
what all is included in that?
Well, I'm just trying to compare, so the 866 versus the annual 737 above it, is that a double counting, or is that,
No. So the 866 is projects that we haven't continued into the future years. So the annual is things that you incur every year, such as professional fees and Heart of Lebanon and the facade program. And then the one-time pay-as-you-go expenses are more specific. I'd have to look at the report to tell you what those line items were, but Tanya gave us a budget breakout of what you guys are planning to spend, and we use that to build that estimate.
okay, so as we look at cash flow for 21, 22, and 23, those one-times are not forecast essentially.
I'm not sure I caught all of that. I'm sorry.
We're good.
You want to ask again, or?
Yeah, no, we're good. I'm-
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Super. Any other questions for Lauren?
No. Lauren, thank you so much for the information. Greatly appreciate it. And with that, we will move on. Does she have additional? I apologize.
Thank
We're
you for
good.
having us help you with this. If you have any revisions you'd like us to make, please let us know. We can update your cash flows as would help you guys.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Lauren. Really appreciate it.
Lauren, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, we have a couple of facade improvement requests. First up, I believe, is the Huntington Bank location. Just for disclosure purposes, I am employed by Huntington National Bank, so I will be foregoing all Huntington National Bank conversation and skipping the vote on this as well. And with that, I believe we may have a representative joining us remotely.
Project, and we do have representation from Huntington Bank tonight. Sorry, I had to get the screen sharing code. One minute. Okay. 102 North Lebanon Street, otherwise known as currently the Huntington Bank.
Can't hear you, Derek.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. I don't know if I'm yelling. I don't know if I'm, don't know where I'm at. So if I'm,
Here you do. Hi.
if I'm yelling, just let me know. So 102 North Lebanon Street, Huntington Bank received a certificate of appropriateness at the May Historic Preservation Commission meeting to replace windows and doors to match existing configuration and geometry, with the exception of adding a center mullion in the replacement windows. And they have received approval for an exterior accent color of Benjamin Moore Kindle charcoal in place of the maroon color that you see there in the building today. So let me show you the current view. As I mentioned, the new charcoal color will take place of the red color, maroon color that you see in this photo. And the geometry of the windows essentially does not change. The center mullion will, you can see that in the second floor window there currently. And because of the size and weight of the new window replacement on the first floor, that mullion will need to be there so that the window is essentially two different sections for weight purposes. So I can tell you that the HPC discussed this project in depth. Most people look at this building and are like, oh my gosh, it does not fit in with our downtown facades. And I will tell you that had we had a Historic Preservation Commission in place in the mid-70s, and Huntington Bank would have come to us and asked for demolition and reconstruction of a building, and been awarded that demolition, they would have wanted to see an application for redevelopment that looks like these windows. Redevelopment is supposed to reflect the time in which this redevelopment happened. And these windows do that. Like them or not, they have become historic in our district. They have become a landmark. So to change them now would be a disservice to the reconstruction of the current windows. So that's why the certificate of appropriateness was issued to allow them to replace the windows with the same geometry instead of suggesting they needed to replace them with a modern geometry. So that's why you see that. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that theory if you have them. So here are some historic pictures. In fact, I'll get that up there. This, where it says Union Federal, is now the triangular windows that you see. So the original building has long since been more or less demolished. There might be some components of the structure left, but that building does not exist anymore. So to ask them to take it back to what it originally was would be a complete rebuild. And then you get into the conversation of a false sense of history. You don't want to create that false sense of history. Again, you want to embrace what is there now. So that was somewhere in the 50s, and you can see somewhere in the mid-70s it changes to what we have today. So that is a kind of a briefing on how we got to the certificate of appropriateness. I'm happy to answer any questions on that before I move on to the breakdown of estimates, if there are any, or I can move right into the estimates. Okay. So the estimates, the applicant did provide 2 estimates as required. Versatile Construction Company had the low estimate. I pulled out, as you saw from the estimate report, if you looked at those, I pulled out anything that was ineligible and did not include them in your estimate report. So the low estimate came in at $220,000 and $245, excuse me, which puts them into a category 12, which makes them have an owner share of $125,000 minimum, and the maximum eligibility for grant is $95,045. And again, as always, that is a maximum amount. There is always the room for discussion on that. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you have for staff, and there is Huntington representation on the virtual side of things tonight.
Derek, is there a structural concern about the existing facade?
No, there is not.
So if I missed it, I apologize. Help me understand the request for the windows, since we're not changing configuration, I agree with, and we're changing color from a mauve to a gray.
Green.
So this is a request. Is there an efficiency and energy issue?
Yes, yep. So these are original, 70s windows, and the efficiency level at that is basically 0. So this new window is a modern window with, the efficiency levels that would be required for any new construction. So they will meet the modern day efficiency code. So it is updating essentially, getting close to a 50-year-old window at this point, 45-year-old window.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Derek, I think Dr. Taylor was kind of getting to the heart of maybe my question too, a little bit. I of course, don't have the history of the commission to know what maybe choices have been made when it comes to the max grant versus any portion thereof, but the difference between redevelopment and new businesses that are coming in and working on the facade or changing the facade of a new building rather than maintenance, really, of an existing building. And if that has played a part in the amount that we may consider compared to the max. So I would defer to the wisdom of the group here, but as I'm looking at this particular request, I'm trying to balance between what's kind of a maintenance upgrade request versus, some of the redevelopment pieces.
Yeah, I mean, you get into that different, in my opinion, as staff, there is certainly a different conversation, different level of conversation when you get into a 127 North Meridian Street type project, which was essentially the old Patrick's office space and Truett office space, which was truly a preservation effort of a historic structure and a reconstruction level to make it, get the historic life back into it. This is certainly not a traditional historic building. It is more in line with a maintenance project. But there certainly is some level of investment that goes along with that to make it a viable building for years to come.
Right.
So,
of course.
I think I know where you're headed, and they're both eligible, but it is worded as a max grant in the resolution. So depending on the wishes of the RDC, I think that is open for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I got a question. Is that being it's a bank, and maybe Corey can answer this being a banker, is that a different grade of glass than what it was 50 years ago?
Yeah,
Yes,
Or
it is.
a tempered glass or something that doesn't break as easy as a glass,
I can't speak to that level of the glass, but it is a high-efficiency insulated glass, whereas what you see today is not.
do we have Julie on the phone?
Yes,
Is that who's joined
Julie,
us?
And I believe the Versatile Construction representative is on the phone as well, so they can answer that detail.
I was just curious.
Yep.
And Julie may be able to speak a little bit to some of the investment that's possibly happening to reduce the energy footprint, go a little more green, those sorts of things with this request as well.
Yeah, I don't know what you need to do to engage them.
Just speaking into the microphone here, it's a little bit harder for them to hear from the lectern, so if you want to relay the question
Okay.
to Julie, she can hear you now. Julie, you're with us, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So Matt, you can pop up a little bit here in the council chambers, but you can go ahead and relay the question that was asked by the commission, and then she can speak directly to them.
Okay. Julie, they have some questions for you on the construction of the new replacement windows, efficiency level, and if they are, for lack of a better term, shatterproof or have some sort of protection on there to be a safer window.
Okay, I'm going to let Richard Newland, my GC, answer that question if I can. He's definitely more experienced with that. Do you still there, Richard?
They do not have a security film on it, if that's what you're asking. They're a 1-inch insulated clear thermal paint panel with a high efficiency level of glass.
I was just curious.
Okay.
Is that considered?
It looks like that answers the question.
Okay.
Then the only other thing was if Julie wanted to touch on some of the other energy efficiencies they've invested in, both in that building and as Huntington footprint.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's definitely something we've talked about. Corey just asked if you could touch on the other investments that you've made into the property that over time, since Huntington has been there, not related to this project, so if you could speak about that, that'd be great.
Sure. We have redone the entire first floor of the building as far as the appearance of it. We've also done furniture. We're working on the HVAC. We have done some upgrades to it, but it's still very challenging for us, and we're still working on upgrading those. We upgraded the tenant space on the second floor, the restrooms and that. It went to a LED light on the second floor as well as the first floor. So we're certainly trying to make this more efficient. Upcoming next year, we intend to, I think the parts in the elevator are original, so we're planning to upgrade that as well, which is a pretty big expense, but it definitely needs to be done. So we've remodeled the basement as well. So we have spent, I would say on the main building, we have spent a significant amount of money. On the tenant spaces that are attached, maybe not quite so much. We've also done the parking lots as well. We've resurfaced those. We've changed the remote ATM so that it runs into the building. So over the years, there's been quite a lot of money spent on an upgrade, and I hope that you all find that it's agreeable and that you like the appearance of it.
Julie, wasn't there a new roof put on there, like about 4 years ago?
Yeah, a partial roof, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Did that as well. Thank you, Richard.
Any other questions for Julie or reps from Versatile?
I have a question for him. How much anticipated savings on the utility bills with the high efficiency windows and things?
Julie, Keith has a question related to, is there any data that supports the energy cost savings of these new windows after they're put in versus the windows that are currently existing?
Well, I'm hoping it's a huge difference, but Richard, is there any kind of documentation that says what the expectations are for these windows?
I mean, we'd have to run the data on it of old versus new, but they're a high efficiency, low E window, and there should be a considerable amount of savings in heat and air conditioning, particularly on the air conditioning side.
Okay, we have tried just resealing the windows, and that has definitely not done anything for us. And Huntington is an Energy Star company, so we are always looking for ways to make our branches more energy efficient. So that's part of the goal of this project, is that our Energy Star scores for this location will increase, because it's been a challenge, definitely a challenge. And also improve the look as well.
Commission, any other questions, comments? With that, I would entertain some comments.
Yeah, if I could, thank you, Mr. President. Well, there's no question Huntington Bank has been a foundational cornerstone of our square. It's an attractive building. My concern has nothing to do with their proposal. My concern is with our current circumstances here, faced with the pandemic. I've done nothing but spend the last 2 months hearing concerns about everything from delayed property tax collection to business failure. And I think personally, based on things I've heard in my own personal opinion, I think Baker Tilly's estimate of a 15% reduction in revenue is very, very, very conservative. I think it could be much greater than that. I also know in the commercial real estate field, I don't know, I have a strong feeling that the commercial real estate field is going to change dramatically, whether that's with logistics, manufacturing, or warehousing. I have some concerns, not with this project specifically, but concerns about this commission expending too much money not knowing what our revenue is in the next 24 months. If this were to have happened in February, if this would have happened before February, I would not have had a problem with this. I think the energy efficiency alone, the reduction of their carbon footprint, it validates our contribution, and we have certainly proven that. But I think now, I would be a little hesitant and would caution the commission to be a little more prudent in our expenditures, at least for the next 24 months, until we can see other elements of the business park that may need our attention, or other attractive incentives that we've offered in the past to new business development. So I just have no hesitation with the project, Derek. I think I've shared it time and again. I value and trust your opinion, and see no reason that this is not a project that you feel should be funded. My question is, Commission, do we fund it at this time? Is this a time in an uncertain economic future for our local community, and we're right on the cusp of making some huge differences and changes in our community? Is this the time we want to move forward with a $125,000 or $94,000 investment for basically what is not a safety or concern issue, which is not changing the appearance of a facility or a facility that's in danger of collapse like we've done in the past? But could this wait for another 12 to 18 to 24 months? I just feel it's imperative that I share that opinion with the commission and ask that we think about what our revenue generation is over the next 12 to 24 months. And as a commission, how are we responsible to be fiscally prudent in these uncertain times?
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Other comments? So with that, I would entertain a motion on the proposal for the Huntington Bank, which is 102, is that the correct address? 102 North Lebanon Street. Any motions?
I'd just like to make a comment. I understand and I understand and I agree with Dr. Taylor as well, because we're just not sure how things are going to be. I'm not real sure about our grant program, if we shouldn't just kind of put it on hold for a little bit, just to see. But yet, I think the bank's a good bank, and they're local, and they're a they're a cornerstone of downtown. Okay, and they're as much due assistance as anyone else on the downtown square that we've given assistance to. I did reach out to Tanya and I'll be happy to share. I made some copies to share to everybody. Just where the RDC is on the funding in the last year and this year up to date so far. We're actually in pretty decent shape. I mean, there's nothing that we couldn't afford to assist. But even if we do assist, I'm like Dr. Taylor, we have to be very prudent on what we do this year on the RDC, as well as Keith and I on the city council level. We have to be a little bit prudent right now, because we're just not sure where the numbers are going to fall. I'm like Dr. Taylor, I've heard the same thing he's heard. And I've seen the same numbers that Baker Tilly had just give us, about 15% cut. I've heard that. Mm-hmm. But I've also heard, it does look better than expected as far as tax revenue coming in.
Right.
People are paying their taxes, which kind of surprised me, but that was the word I got here a week ago from people that have been researching this and trying to find out throughout the state where everybody kind of stands. So it's we just don't know. That's the thing.
Right.
As far as I think we have enough in our TIF fund that we could handle this thing, I think we would be okay. We just got to be very prudent. Now, I would probably, I know we're in the category 12, where it's almost like a 50-50 split, and if I was going to make any kind of a recommendation, I'd make it a 50-50 split of only 110,000 instead of 120.
That would actually be more than they're eligible for.
Right,
Excuse me?
That would be more than they're eligible for.
the request is only for 95,
95.
Okay. They requested 95?
their eligibility.
They have to pay the 125.
Okay.
Then,
Dick, my concern
Yeah,
was
I
not,
see it, okay.
okay.
I think the project's worthy. As I said, if this had come to us before this, I would not have hesitated at all and fully support it. The 94,000 or 95,000, we have that, it's clear. We have that money in our budget. I guess I'm trying, and maybe it's a little Chicken Little on me. The sky is falling, but I have heard nothing but negative fiscal reports coming from the governor's office. 15% is what they're looking for agencies to reduce. I know schools are going to be extremely financially challenged with the reopening and the uncertainty of what all that entails, whether it's a second surge of this pandemic. It's all speculation. This has nothing to do with Derek's recommendation or Huntington Bank being a critical key business partner for our community. This simply has to do with some concerns that, what's it look like? What are we going to be confronted with in September, October, November of this year? What businesses may or may not come to us with some other issues, and we have a number of valued business partners. Again, I compliment the mayor and the efforts that he's taken and done over the last 2 or 3 years. I think you look at our entryways and our gateways, there's no question we're making strides as a community. And Huntington is part of that. It is simply my concern that the fiscal uncertainty of what we could be confronted with as far as revenue generation for this commission and what some other requests that we have no idea would come, would it be better for us to wait as a commission to take these grant projects in 2021, say a year from now? And I know that is an inconvenience to Huntington, and there are several more that are here, but there's been a lot of inconvenience through a lot of communities. And so whether it's, the park being closed for how many weeks, or wearing masks at a meeting, which, thank you, Corey, for taking yours off, because I feel bad. But, that's my point. I just want to make it very clear, this has nothing to do with the project, nothing to do with the recommendation. This is simply my concerns about our fiscal stability, our financial stability as we move forward in these uncertain times.
Right. And I think if you look at the flip side of that coin, right, so we're in a very unique situation from the Redevelopment Commission to offer that support. As you look around our nation and a lot of the stuff that's happened over the last couple of months, I spent the last 6 to 8 weeks of my professional career putting money in small businesses' pockets, businesses less than 500 employees. And that was kind of my contribution to getting through this piece. I think as you look at the RDC, there's another uniqueness, right? So as you look at, just as the Redevelopment Commission is looking to be prudent, I think all of your small businesses, your medium-sized businesses are doing that exact same thing. And how can we, as a community, weather the next 30, 60, 90, even 6 months to 18 months, right? So as you look at this type of investment, does this help ensure the footing of being fiscally responsible for 6 to 12 to 18 months down the road? So, I think there's definitely two sides to that, but certainly agree with you. One thing that we may consider, if it pleases the commission, is possibly we table this specific item until we take a deeper look at the finances, get a little more comfortable across the board. Could entertain a motion to that effect.
I think that's an excellent kind of middle of the road. Therefore, would make a motion that this grant be tabled until November of 2019, at which time we can take a look and hopefully have, and I put a specific date on there. If you don't want anything that's specific, that's fine. But until we have a better handle on our revenue generation as we see how the rest, this third and fourth quarter of 2019 play out as far as revenue generation for the commission.
Rob, can you remind me, so if we table, that would fall under the old business on the agenda? Does that need to be readdressed, brought from the table? Right. Would that have to be each month until then, or if we specify a date? We can specify a date? Okay.
Or I'm good with each month bringing it to the table. I trust the commission. I feel very comfortable with that. I mean, if we want to, if as president, you want to move that agenda item forward each month, I think I have no issues with that. So I could, however you want me to reword it.
Table it
Yeah,
until further
just table
notice.
until
Yes.
further notice. Seconds.
I'll second that.
Keith with a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect.
Hey,
Thank you
Corey,
very much.
Pat,
Yes,
pass, keep one for yourself and pass the
absolutely.
other two down too. This is what Tanya had sent me, information on the RDC, on the funding.
Thank you, ma'am.
First two pages are this year, and the last four pages are all last year. Thank you, Tanya, for sending that to me, so. I
have
just
a
thought that would
question
help us.
Further that discussion, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
So for me, as the person processing these applications, I would appreciate some guidance on whether or not the program in general is on hold until November 2020. I don't know that we have any imminent, unsafe applications that will come to the table. So for me to continue to lead applicants down this road and possibly eat up this money for Huntington Bank, you know, is kind of a unfair situation to Huntington
Right, so-
and maybe any other applicants that come to the table. So if we're not going to hear any more applications, I will continue to stack them up in line because it is worded as a first come, first served process. So to table one, I would like you to give me some guidance or even consider tabling the entire program until November of 2020.
I don't know that as a commission, we would want to table all of that. I do anticipate that it would still be in a first come, first serve if you all agreed. So, additional requests, I would certainly still love to come through the office and address those at that point. I think that would even give us a better idea of what we'd be looking at. Maybe if we look at the gamut before November and we're able to allocate accordingly, that may be a better option than completely tabling.
I concur, Corey. I think for your guidance, I would say we continue the process. And if we're a little more cautious as we move forward, we have those in the queue. And it comes to a point that unless you feel that there's a safety issue or danger to human life issue, we can continue to keep Huntington in the queue as of 8 June 2020. And if let's face it, the economy got a bigger boost on our employment this was a week ago than we anticipated. 3 months from now, I hope everybody says, boy, Taylor, what an idiot. What was he talking about with bad economy? But I'd prefer that than say that. So my advice, or what I would suggest the commission's guidance to you is we continue to put these in the queue. You continue to submit them, review them as you would. And if we come to a point, if I understand Rob correctly, we can take the Huntington Bank off the table at any time and vote on that.
Yep.
And I would be very comfortable with that. It just kind of addresses the fiscal concern I have, that we're not jumping into a commitment where we have not quite as much leeway with knowing and not knowing what the future holds. Does that help? Did I answer your question, or did I confuse you more?
It answers my question. I just still have some concern, I guess, overall for an applicant who is first in line, but then gets to a point where we hear them and the money's not there anymore.
I think what I'm suggesting is we get to a point where we start to approve grants again, the person that's first in line is going to be the first grant we approve.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll process them.
And
Right.
that's again, I'm speaking not for the commission, I'm
agree.
speaking as a commissioner.
Sure.
That
So-
Huntington's still here, I don't anticipate my approving any until I have a little better sense that we have a little more stability in both the business park and the Indiana economy and the economy of the nation. And then we keep in the order. That would be you saying, hey, Bob, here's, Huntington Bank was here, and then Cowan Drugs is here, and,
Right. and so forth.
whoever else is next.
Okay, that makes it clear. So to continue to put them in the queue, but I'm not bringing them on a monthly basis, and you're deciding
No,
possibly to
correct.
award
Yeah, it's
somebody ahead of somebody
it's
else.
still going to be a
Yep.
top-down. Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'll stack them up, just like I always do, as if we had ran out of money for the year. So
Perfect.
I'll continue to process them, continue to take the applications. It just allows me to give the applicant some direction on how it is that we're processing these until a certain date.
Absolutely.
We're at 250 a year, 250K a year. Thank
This
you.
year remaining, I have that. This year's balance is currently at 185,000 and some change.
Remaining or spent? Remaining, not spent.
Remaining.
Okay, perfect.
For
And that's
this
before
fiscal
this-
year.
For the 2020 year, yes.
Thank you.
And that's before taking this 95
Correct.
as of
That-
today?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
As it sits right now, the
Yeah.
balance for 2020 is 185,240.
Got it.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you very much, Derek. I appreciate you. I've got some friends in the city council back there looking at us, so in the interest of time, are you guys good with moving forward? Awesome. So we've got two more agenda items I'd like to get to. So first discussion around the, what's known as the Montgomery Wards Building. This is a discussion, I believe we're going to have Mr. LePage join us again.
Mr. President, did we have a grant request from Cowan Drugs as well tonight?
They tabled that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been tabled.
All those have been tabled under one motion?
Well, no, Cowan's
They
pulled
took
theirs.
it off the
Yep.
agenda
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
until further notice or something.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, Ed. Sorry. I didn't hear you ask Corey. I'm sorry. No, that's okay.
Derek,
Okay,
it's up to you.
up to me. All right, so 125 South Meridian Street, affectionately known as the Montgomery Ward Building. I've been working with the current owner for several months now, almost a year, on crafting a RDC grant application. We weren't comfortable with the first application on it producing any longevity for the building, any real results, any level of investment from the RDC that would last until the next owner or even a certain amount of time. We felt it was more of a Band-Aid than a long-term fix. So back and forth for several months, and the conversation started to fire up again on what it was that I was going to allow application-wise to come in front of you all. And I still couldn't get there with the applicant to produce some sort of application that really addressed the issues. And as you see, we eventually were able to land on some structural engineering reports and an owner's representative assessment of the building as well. The owner's rep is somebody we hired for the city to do all of our construction inspection on the owner's rep side. So he has some experience in historical structures and preservation of those historical structures. I believe he cut his teeth in the Circle Center Mall renovation, so very significant preservation and renovation efforts in downtown Indianapolis. And along with the structural engineer, they worked on that together. So those reports told us exactly the condition of the facade of the building. This building is not, typically in some of our traditional downtown buildings, the brick is actually structural. So the walls themselves are interwoven brick. A lot of these brick walls that you see in the buildings around the square specifically that face the courthouse, I mean, they can be 12 inches wide, and it's this mangled brick altogether that's holding everything up. This is not the case on this building. It's actually a brick facade with a steel structure underneath. So the brick itself, the steel structure of the building that's holding the weight bearing of the components is in poor shape. But the brick facade of the building, which is massive, this is a four-sided building, it's a very unique building in our downtown inventory, it is failed, basically, for lack of a better term. So in the report, you can see it's getting to a point where this is unsafe. Brick is falling from the building. What has happened over time, water has penetrated the brick facade, whether it be on the parapet cap or through tuck pointing that hasn't been done properly, and it has rotted away all of the metal pieces that hold the brick to the actual structure of the building. And in that report, specifically the Kramer Company's report, he flew it with his drone and got some really good images. Images otherwise would be very difficult to get, and you can see how the building is pulling away. So basically, long story short, gave the applicant the opportunity to produce an RDC grant request that really addressed the concern of the brick falling from the building, which, to get to a certain degree of comfort, would have been removing all the brick from the parapet wall cap down to the top of the second-story windows and replacing the lintels above the windows that are certainly failed and resetting all of that brick. And that's not it. You know, that gets it to a safer point than it is now. There's still many, many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars that has to go into that building to make it viable again, specifically on the facade. Some of the numbers we were getting on the facade investment alone, because of the size, we're dealing with about 15,000 square feet above ground, four-sided. We were in the $750,000 to $1 million range for new windows, fixing all the brick, new storefront. And you haven't even touched the inside yet. The inside is in very poor shape. The plaster ceilings are all falling in. It is a complete redo on the inside to make it a usable building. So you're looking at another maybe, based off of estimates that we've had from other redos in our downtown, you're looking at somewhere total investment possibly in the $3 to $4 million range. The other layer involved here is a $3 to $4 million investment in a building that zoning-wise has no available parking, which has been a struggle. And honestly, we've kind of created that problem internally with some of the zoning ordinances that we have and the real or perceived parking problem we have downtown. The reuse of that building, even if you get an investor to do the $3 to $4 million complete redo, still requires some level of concession either on our end or their end to produce some sort of parking for the reuse of the building. And there's not a single use out there that doesn't require parking. So that's somewhat of a problem, problematic for the reuse. The investment level is the other problematic side of this. So we entered into a conversation about what's it look like to purchase the building and demolish the building. That's ultimately best case scenario fate for this building. The owner agrees. I think we all, staff-wise, agree. It's very unfortunate. I'm not proud to bring forward an application for purchase and demolition of one of our historic inventory buildings. But it gets to a point over 80, 60, 70 years where proper maintenance hasn't been done to these buildings. To bring them back has very little historic value at the end of the day. You're dealing with steel beams, a handful of them inside maybe, that would remain, and everything else has to be redone. So is it better to have the conversation about purchase, demolition, temporary parking lot, possibly throw out an RFP for redevelopment? Here's the property for $1. Give us your best submittal. Maybe a building that's about half the footprint that could encompass its own parking. Maybe it's entering into an agreement with the parking lot to the north, which once upon a time was included in this property. So, there's several different options, but short term, the best option is is acquisition, and unfortunately, in my opinion, demolition of the structure as well. So tonight, I'm presenting to you a purchase agreement that the real estate agent that the city uses for purchases has put together for a commercial property for $100,000. They pay for their closing fees, we pay for ours, they pay the prorated taxes, straight closing, as conventional as closing as you're going to get. So you have that in front of you tonight for review and approval. I would ask that, depending on your all feeling on that side of things, maybe making a motion to allow the mayor to sign that purchase agreement upon any review that may need to happen or comments. It's a very straightforward commercial contract used by Indiana realtors every day. So it's put together and reviewed and very standard contract. Included in the information I sent you was the environmental studies that we have done to date. There are some urban legends about this building and the contamination. I can tell you that the building is eligible, the property is eligible for a comfort letter from IDEM, which basically essentially means barring, discovery of a nuclear bomb that nobody has found yet, it's a clean site. So there is opportunity for redevelopment. And we're going through the process right now to update the phase 1, do the lead and asbestos testing, and apply for that comfort letter. And that's all being done through our brownfield grant, so no cost to the city, which will need the lead and asbestos testing for demolition. So we'll cross that off the list, assuming we get to that point. And there are no concerns. I've been through the building several times. There's non-friable asbestos in the building, which means basically it's asbestos material that is, as long as you don't ground up and create a dust out of it, it's safe to throw into a landfill. Oddly enough, lead-based paint doesn't matter if you're demolishing. It just has to be made aware that there's lead-based paint for the contractors to know that it's there. But it doesn't prevent any special needs for demolition necessarily. So we'll have those checked off the list. You also have in front of you the closing fee estimate, which is a relatively safe number based off of all closings we've dealt with over the years. And also a professional services agreement from our owner's rep. And it's more or less kind of a budget number. The contract certainly needs to be tweaked to reflect the conversation that we've had. I wanted to get a number for tonight to discuss. For him to manage the RFP process of the demolition and to actually manage the demolition as well. It is going to require surgical skills to have this building dropped and not create a massive issue on State Road 32 or our newly reconstructed infrastructure on Meridian Street, or you name it, surrounding properties. So I did meet with a demolition contractor that we have recently used, and I asked them to provide me a budget number, so I knew what level of proposals we were going to need to meet the state requirements. And it's going to be, at minimum, over $150,000, so probably 150 to 200 to 225 range. To demolish and backfill the property. So that's why we wanted a proposal from our owner's rep to manage that whole process for us, so that he can take care of it and make sure that all the contractors are crossing their T's and dotting their I's. So I know it's a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions. The most pressing issue tonight is some level of movement on the purchase agreement. We have a tentative closing date for the end of the month. And I did provide you appraisals. Those came in today, literally like 4 o'clock. So they are there. If you open the link right now, you'll see them. The low appraisal was $100,000 and the high appraisal was $110,000. So the average of the two would be 105, which we are below.
Which statute requires we're below the average of the two?
We cannot be above.
We can't be above.
10% is that maybe if we had to, but we're within the state statute.
Okay, perfect. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll ask Derek a question. Now, the owner of the building, what if we say no? What's his response?
I don't know. I can give you the background of the negotiations if you would like, to know where we started and how we ended up.
I can understand
If we
that.
say no, we're not going to sign it. It's at a point, likely, unless they're willing to make an application, significant application, which they're not going to, for some sort of facade preservation, there would likely be some sort of unsafe building order issued on the property. And probably speculation, but some sort of legal battle there as well.
So we would have a condemned building on our square?
Correct. And no future for reuse.
I understand.
Right.
Yeah, and
Mr.
as I
President.
mentioned, RFP-wise, redevelopment. There's several different avenues. We honestly throw out an RFP right now on the property, after purchase. See if there's somebody out there that, again, give us your best proposal, we'll give you the current structure for $1, or whatever that fee is. But I have a feeling in that scenario, there are other incentives involved there to make it work. That investment level to make it work is going to be very difficult even if you give the property to somebody as is. Second option, as I mentioned, RFP wise, purchase it, demo it immediately, throw out the RFP for redevelopment of the site. Get it reused immediately, get it back on the tax roll, get it back collecting a viable business, collecting those dollars, and contributing back to our district and ultimately the TIF. As is right now, it's not doing anything for anybody. And then option 3 is, acquisition, demolition, and hold on to it as an investment. Make it a temporary parking lot for now until the economy turns around. Maybe you can get a bigger level of investment. We can certainly have conversations with the parking lot owner to the north. He's been approached several times over the last few years. There hasn't been a deal necessarily worked out between private developer and current landowner. I think we have some better options to throw out there to parking lot owner than any developer would, to partner with some sort of parking lot swap. We do own a parking lot right around the corner that's somewhat comparable. It's not apples to apples, but to gain, I think there's potential. Don't want to speak for that current property owner, but I think there's potential to gain control of the entire half block there, both parcels.
Perfect. Dr. Taylor?
No, I was going to ask, is there any interest on the behalf of the county? It seems like county entities take up a lot of parking on our square.
No.
I don't know if Mayor, I'll let you speak to that.
They would have to respond to emails before they get interested in actually making a purchase of something worthwhile.
I would say there wouldn't be interest in a county building. If we wanted to come up with if we do purchase the building and make it into a temporary parking lot, if there was some type of agreement, we may listen to that as a short-term type discussion. But I think from a redevelopment, I think we would rather see a privately owned building that's on the property taxes contributing to the district. Yeah.
And I will say, from a short-term perspective, like Mayor was speaking of, we, as a city, we issue, I believe the number is 20-plus parking permits a year to the county. So if we were to carry this over, until the economy recovers or whatever that looks like, potentially we could use this as a replacement there that would help our downtown business owners in a different way. So I think there's ways to work through that, but.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other comments?
I'd just like to add that, if I can get all this off here for a minute. I spoke to Derek and Kevin. They talked to me about this, and my thoughts, and I basically agree with them. I think it's a great, first time I looked at the pictures of the building, I'm thinking this thing needs to come down. I mean, it's really in bad shape. And they've got, the alley's been closed off a couple times, and I know some of the walkway along the south side, so it is really a dangerous building.
I think we lost some bricks this
And,
past winter too, right?
It's every quarter, there's a couple that come down.
Yeah, and I don't see the present owner wanting to invest a lot in it to fix it up, or if he had intentions to, I think they would have. But at this present time, I don't think they have the interest to do that. And when I spoke to the guys, I said, you know, I think this is a good spot for the Redevelopment Commission, being that we do have a TIF in the downtown area, that here we could get the control of a site. Okay, yeah, it's going to cost us some money to buy, it's going to cost us some money to take down, but we've got a site that the city can promote. Being if we could work on some other ideas to make it a little more attractive site for any kind of a business or something that can go back there. You know, we're always seeing these small apartment buildings with a little business underneath. We're seeing a lot of those. And I'm starting to see a lot of those now with some businesses opening up too, so which is kind of good. But, you know, that might be an ideal spot for there if everything else works out. But if not, we got a parking space. And the other side of that is we could have it for a while until something opens up or the economy gets better, to where we have somebody that really wants to come down and invest. But I think it's something that we, the city, would have control of, as opposed to waiting on a
We, the
property
RDC.
owner and nothing happening, and the walls falling down, and all of a sudden somebody gets hurt, and then the city's going to have to step in and take it in. So
Right.
I think it's something, being a redevelopment commission, I think that's something that we should be trying to develop for the future of our community. So, you know, I would highly support this idea, that we move forward with the purchase agreement. And I did tell Derek I was a little bit concerned on the professional services agreement. I think that's a little high, and it doesn't really identify some of the needs that we're looking for in this type of project. But I think that needs to be negotiated. But I think we do need to have some, because I know Kevin is probably pretty stacked up in his office, that he doesn't need another thing that he can take care of. But we do need somebody in a professional status that can get those bid documents out and get those, and make sure the contractor has all the permits he needs, and everybody knows what the do's and don'ts are before we start taking this thing down. So those are my thoughts, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments?
I have one last question. What are we doing? Is this an emergency, as you calling it?
According to the structural engineer's report, it would be classified as a public safety hazard.
But again, I guess I asked this next question. It is a public emergency, but we don't own it now, right?
Correct.
So who does that go back to then?
As it sits right now,
To the owner?
Margaret Brandenburg, yes.
I understand that, but I'm just saying after what we just did in the first thing, at this thing of tabling, how's this going to fall into that? That big of an emergency, is it?
It's an immediate problem.
And that's my question. Is it absolutely now?
The sidewalk will remain closed until it is demolished or repaired.
So,
The sidewalk on the south side?
Correct.
So, Keith, I think the difference I see here is not only is it a public safety issue, but we're actually purchasing something, that's there. There'll have to be some more dollars put towards it, there's no doubt, but I think that's a critical piece of property on our town square, and the fact that we purchased it and own it, I guess I could say we could squabble over whose responsibility in this and that, or do we wait a while? But I think in this particular case, I'm more advocating for purchasing the property, becomes in our possession, or whatever Rob tells us who eventually owns it, but the potential then for that purchase to have greater value as the economy comes back, and not only financial value, but usability value to our town, to the square, and our efforts here in Lebanon. I think it's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, and I was speaking against spending money in the first part, but I think it's two distinctively different expenditures that we're looking at this point.
I would totally agree. So with that being said, Derek, as far as this evening looks, obviously, you had mentioned the purchase agreement and the items kind of rolled up in that. Now, is that separate from the professional services agreement that Dick was talking about earlier?
Yeah, and certainly I agree that the language in the professional service agreement needs to be tweaked. If you're comfortable with a ceiling for that professional services agreement, we can negotiate that number and tweak the language and have it reviewed for approval. Or if you'd like to see it come back for approval in July, we can do that. But the conversation I had with Kramer Companies was to represent the RDC for the RFP process of the demolition, the awardal of the demolition contract, and for demolition inspections until the project is completed, backfilled, compaction test, everything that go along with that. So it's definitely, once you get past the RFP process, more than pushing paper, for sure. Yeah.
So because
I don't see any reason that we couldn't wait till the next month and have him come back with another agreement. Because you're not going to jump on it tomorrow. No. I mean, you got to go through the purchase agreement. That's going to take several days.
Yeah, we're closing June 30th,
Yeah.
So
being said, and because my technology is smarter than me currently, so what is the dollar amount that would be associated with the purchase?
So 100,000 plus the closing fee estimates of $3,850. So I would say, just to make sure that, we've approved the appropriate money and not coming back for $10 or $100 or whatever the case is, $105,000.
So a not to exceed 105?
Yes.
Okay. And then that would obviously be pending final legal review. And then if the commission authorizes the mayor to sign on behalf of the commission. So I would entertain any motions.
I'll make that motion that we approve not to exceed $105,000 for a purchase agreement for the former Montgomery Ward building, and with review and approval for the mayor to sign the agreement.
Second from motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. City councilors, we got one more, I promise. It's a very important one. We'll get this done relatively quick, I believe. Commission, this is new to the agenda, but I believe you all got an email this evening. This is in reference to Resolution 2020-02, which is a capture of the tax increment revenue. Rob, if you'd be able to give us a brief on that?
Yep. Mr. President, Commissioners, again, apologize on the late notice. This was set from our end to go out a month prior and just got caught up in some things. So sorry for the late notice getting to you. As this just really goes on the dovetail of what Baker Tilly's presentation addressed, what the commission has done in all years prior. As some of you may recall, the deadline used to be in July. The legislature moved it up to June 15th to make a determination by this body on capturing the TIF as opposed to the excess TIF, as opposed to having it go to the other taxing districts. So I'll read through this, but if you recall from Baker Tilly's presentation, I believe they're not showing a positive increment until years 2022. Again, Lauren went through that presentation a little bit earlier. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address, but I'll just read through it. Again, this is a pretty straightforward determination. Resolution 2020-02, the need to capture tax increment revenue, and Indiana law requires this commission to make certain determinations for the following budget year 2021, and then it would provide notice to the respective taxing districts and the Boone County Auditor, the Lebanon City Council, and other taxing units that we've done in the past. We have in Exhibit A the previously established allocation areas. Again, Baker Tilly provided its presentation, and this resolution would state that the commission hereby determines for the budget year 2021 all of the incremental assessed value of the taxable property in each of the allocation areas will be captured. No excess value from the allocation areas shall pass through the respective units. The President and the Secretary of the Commission are hereby directed to provide written notice to the various taxing districts, and those are all set forth in Exhibit B, which template of the letter.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Any questions, comments from the commission? With that, I would entertain a motion on Resolution 2020-2.
Move as presented.
Got a motion?
Second?
And a second? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, we've got one more job to do before we can adjourn. I would entertain a motion on claims.
Make a motion, we approve claims?
Second?
John? We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And finally, motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are adjourned. Next meeting of the Redevelopment Commission will be Monday, July 13th at 6:30 PM.